Tonight on PrimeTime, Donald Trump says the United States could take the oil in Iran, even seizing Karg Island, the country's main export hub. As tensions rise, Iran warns of retaliation, raising fears for the Strait of Hormuz, a key artery for global energy. Oil has jumped to $115 per barrel. Markets are sliding and food prices could follow. Still, Trump says a peace deal could come fairly quickly. Can diplomacy still prevail as military threats and market shocks collide? Stay with us. Hello and welcome to Prime Time. Our top story tonight: oil prices are climbing sharply after Donald Trump said the United States could seize Iran's Karg Island. The remarks have shaken markets and raised concerns over global energy supplies.
Oil prices are continuing to rise, with Brent crude now trading above $116 a barrel, marking a rise of nearly 60% since the start of the month. The surge follows comments by US President Donald Trump suggesting the US could seize Iran's key export hub, Karg Island, alongside warnings that the Strait of Hormuz must reopen. Markets are reacting sharply to the risk of supply disruption through the strait, which carries a large share of global oil shipments. Analysts warn that if the route remains restricted, prices could climb towards $150 a barrel, further increasing inflationary pressure worldwide. The impact is already clear in Asia. Japan's Nikkei index has fallen around 2.8%, while South Korea's Kospi dropped close to 3% as investors respond to rising energy costs and uncertainty over supply. In Europe, markets have also come under pressure. The Stoxx 600 index is down about 9% for the month, marking its steepest decline since 2020, while energy prices continue to push inflation expectations higher. Beyond financial markets, the price shock is spreading across the real economy. Costs for fuel, transport and industrial materials are rising, with knock-on effects expected for food and manufacturing, particularly in regions heavily dependent on imported energy. Governments are now preparing responses. European energy ministers are set to coordinate measures to stabilize supplies, while policymakers in Asia face mounting pressure as currencies weaken and fuel costs rise sharply.
To unpack the geopolitical, economic and security implications, I'm joined by Jason Isaacson, Chief Policy and Political Affairs Officer at the American Jewish Committee, joining us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Isaacson, welcome and thank you for joining us on A News.
Thank you, Bakhtiar. It's good to be with you.
Mr. Isaacson, how serious should we take Donald Trump's suggestion of seizing Iran's oil infrastructure, and what makes Karg Island so strategically critical to Iran and global markets?
Well, thank you. Look, Karg Island is obviously the main export hub for the Iranians. Seizing it would have enormous consequences for the supply of oil. It's obviously one of the ways that the United States could exert even greater pressure on the Iranian regime to come to the table and seriously negotiate an end to this war.
So how vulnerable is the Strait of Hormuz at this moment?
Well, it's highly vulnerable, as we see. Most of the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked by Iran. They have threatened ships that pass by. They've allowed a few to go through. There has been a kind of a trickle of passage through the Strait of Hormuz in the last couple of weeks, especially in the last few days. But the bulk of the energy that flows through the Strait of Hormuz, the oil and gas, about 1/5 of the world's supply that regularly transit the Strait of Hormuz, has been blocked. And so the question is, look, it's easier to block the Strait of Hormuz by firing at a cable or setting up the mines that the Iranians are able to deploy along the coast, than it is to free that area, to clear that area. It will be very costly for the United States, very complicated for the United States, working with allies to push back against the threat that Iran poses to the transit through the strait. It will be better to do that through diplomatic resolution of this conflict.
Mr.
But at
Isaacson,
this point, it's not clear that we're getting to that.
so what would ground operations actually look like in Iran?
So ground operations in Iran were along the scale of what we have seen in past Middle East conflicts, would require more than the U.S. forces have deployed to this point. But the fact that there are now some 50,000 U.S. Soldiers and Marines in the area or about to be in the area gives the United States significant military leverage on top of course, the airstrikes, the 15,000 or so sorties that have been flown that have targeted military assets of the Iranian regime, along with the nuclear program, along with Israel's actions in support of what the United States has been doing. But deploying ground forces would be a major leap, one that obviously the president is holding out as a possibility to exert further pressure on the Iranian regime.
So Iran says it's waiting for U.S. troops. How credible is that threat?
Looks a highly credible threat. I mean, the United States doesn't casually put Marines on ships and send them across the ocean to be in preparation for the potential of deployment on the ground, whether it would be a deployment on Karg Island, which would be a complicated operation, but obviously something that the United States has been planning as a possibility, or whether it is to seize the highly enriched uranium stockpile in Isfahan, which is another possibility that people have speculated about. But just knowing that there is the potential of ratcheting it up to the deployment of ground forces on top of the multiple airstrikes and the destruction of the Iranian Navy and the destruction of its Air Force and the destruction of so many of its missiles, although they still have a good number left, puts additional pressure on an Iranian regime that is obviously trying to figure out how it's going to end this successful way from their standpoint.
Mr. Isaacson, oil prices has hit $115 per barrel. How much higher could it go if tensions escalate further?
I don't know if there's an upper limit. I mean, I've heard people say $150, maybe even as high as $200. I think that's unlikely. Yes. There is still a great deal of oil in the world in strategic reserves. There was overproduction leading up to this point, so I think we're not in any danger right now. But clearly, the price is rising. People are speculating that this crisis could last for several more weeks, and that will obviously continue to put upward pressure on the oil price, as well as, of course, the markets around the world that have been severely impacted by this conflict. We have a loss into the correction territory in the U.S. stock market, and I know there are stock markets elsewhere in Europe and around the world that have been suffering because of all of this. But let's keep an eye on the purpose of all of this, which is to change the reality in the Middle East, in which you have a rogue regime in Iran that has been destabilizing and attempting to destabilize the entire region, in addition to building the possibility of a military nuclear capability. So this was not a war that anyone really wanted, but it was at some point unavoidable unless the Iranian regime changed its course.
So why are food prices linked to this crisis, and particularly fertilizer exports?
Because the basic raw elements that go into the production of fertilizer come from fossil fuels, and in addition to other elements as well. And those fossil fuel shipments are being blocked because of the Strait of Hormuz being inaccessible for most of the maritime traffic. And so that will have an impact on food prices, on the ability of farmers across the world, in Asia and Africa and elsewhere, to have access to the fertilizers that they need. There are other sources, but this is a significant source and will therefore have present difficulties to farmers, and therefore will affect food prices, food availability and food prices.
Mr. Isaacson, is there any realistic pathway to the quick deal as Trump is talking about?
Well, I don't know. As you know, Bakhtiar, there's been a lot of mixed messaging about all this. At one point, we're talking about the possibility of a quick deal. We're talking about the Iranian regime, begging for a deal, and at the same time, threats from the Iranians as well as the United States. And they're not stopped. The Iranian regime has not stopped firing missiles and drones at many countries, including, of course, Azerbaijan has been struck in March at the Nakhchivan airport. So the Iranians are continuing to pose dangers across the region. Some dozen countries have been involved, have been attacked by Iran. Is there the possibility of coming to a quick conclusion? Look, there's a 15-point peace proposal that has been put forward by the Trump administration. There is a 5-point plan that has been put forward apparently by the Iranians. These proposals are in no way overlapping. They're in sharp conflict. They're ultimate maximalist demands by both sides. But the Pakistanis have tried to play a mediating role, have offered to play a mediating role. Other countries are willing to play a similar role as well, including those that met in Islamabad over the last day and a half or so. Is it possible that the Iranian regime could come to its senses and realize that it has no possibility of a successful outcome of this unless they come to a negotiated agreement with the United States? I think that's possible. A lot depends on their willingness to give up their dream of military nuclear capability and their dream of being able to destabilize the region and control ultimately the Strait of Hormuz, which is really impossible for the region and for the world to tolerate.
So, Mr. Isaacson, what's your anticipation about the war this week?
It looks as though we're in this for some further period. It's unclear how much farther we'll be able to go, but the military campaign by the United States is continuing. Israel's campaign is continuing as well. The regime has been severely degraded, but it hasn't given up the fight. It is continuing to threaten the entire region and attack the entire region. Energy facilities, desalination, steel production, aluminum production facilities as well across the Gulf. I was speaking to a diplomat the other day who was describing Iran, hearing what he was hearing, his counterparts across the Gulf describing Iran as a rabid dog, and a rabid dog that just bites everyone. And that clearly is what the Iranians are doing at this point, and that's a dog that has to be put down.
Jason Isaacson, thank you very much for talking to A News. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
After the break, we will look at the major stories from around the world. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. The Iran war is also beginning to disrupt global trade, with Asia's used car exports among the sectors affected. Shipments now face delays, rerouting and rising costs.
The Iran war is disrupting used car exports across Asia, with dealers in Japan, South Korea and Sri Lanka facing delays and rising costs. Shipments bound for the Middle East have been stalled or rerouted, as congestion and uncertainty affect major ports and shipping lanes. Exporters say hundreds of vehicles have been held at sea or diverted to alternative ports, while some shipments have been sent back. Dealers in Sri Lanka report delays of more than 500 cars as vessels struggle to dock due to congestion caused by diverted cargo. The Middle East remains a key market, accounting for a significant share of exports and also acting as a transit hub for vehicles heading to regions such as Eastern Europe.
I think the biggest challenge was the exports to UAE. UAE has been the largest market for Japanese used vehicles, which consists of 15% of the total export volume. And for particularly to our company, I think we have about 50 luxury cars and supercars stuck in the midway. Some cars have been offloaded at the Sri Lankan Hambantota port. Some was offloaded in the Hanshin port in China. And some of our container shipments were recalled back to Japan.
Japan and South Korea exported a combined $19 billion worth of used cars last year, with Japan accounting for slightly more than half. More than a third of South Korea's 883,000 exports were destined for the Middle East. In South Korea, exporters say the disruption has paralyzed their trading network, with vehicles piling up in storage yards and ports. Shipping costs are rising, containers are harder to secure, and payments from buyers are being delayed.
The Middle East is our most critical market. From there, we expand into Turkey and Europe. Even if we cannot reach places such as Kosovo, Turkish buyers in the Middle East act as a bridge. But now, that network is largely paralyzed.
The Strait of Hormuz, a key route for shipments linked to Dubai, remains a major bottleneck, raising concerns of prolonged disruption if the conflict continues.
The UN nuclear watchdog chief is calling for urgent talks after strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Rafael Grossi, the International Atomic Energy Agency chief, says diplomacy is the only way to resolve tensions over Iran's nuclear program. He warned that the Bushehr nuclear plant has been on alert due to nearby military activity. Though it remains unharmed, Grossi stressed nuclear facilities must never be targeted. He added the dispute ongoing for more than 2 decades cannot be solved through military means and requires renewed negotiations. Israel is intensifying its campaign near the Lebanese border, expanding its military presence in the south as cross-border fighting with Hezbollah continues. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the aim is to reshape the security situation in the north.
The situation along Israel's northern frontier remains volatile, with continued exchanges of fire raising concerns of a wider escalation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he has ordered an expansion of Israel's military buffer zone inside southern Lebanon as fighting along the northern border intensifies. Speaking from Israel's Northern Command on Sunday, Netanyahu said the move is aimed at pushing Hezbollah forces further from the border and preventing attacks on Israeli territory.
In Lebanon, I have just instructed to further expand the existing security zone in order to decisively thwart the threat of invasion and to push anti-tank missile fire away from our border. It must be understood that Nasrallah built up a large force here. He believed that with this force, he would destroy us. Well, we eliminated Nasrallah. We eliminated thousands of Hezbollah militants. And above all, we eliminated the enormous threat of 150,000 missiles and rockets that were intended to devastate Israel's cities. But Hezbollah still retains a residual capability to launch rockets at us. And what I discussed today with the commanders here are ways to remove that threat as well.
Israeli troops were seen positioned along the Lebanese border on Sunday as operations continue in the area. The expansion of the so-called security zone marks a further escalation in Israel's ground operations in southern Lebanon, which began earlier this month. The developments come amid rising regional tensions linked to the broader Israel-Iran confrontation, with Hezbollah operating as one of Tehran's key allies.
Spain has closed its airspace to U.S. planes involved in strikes on Iran, expanding an earlier ban on the use of joint military bases. Defense Minister Margarita Robles said Madrid will not support operations linked to the conflict. The move forces U.S. aircraft to reroute around Spain, though emergency flights remain exempt. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has been one of the most vocal opponents of the U.S. and Israel attacks on Iran. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara is in Berlin for talks aimed at strengthening ties with Germany as his country enters a new phase after years of conflict. During the visit, Germany has signaled support for Syria's post-war recovery as Damascus seeks to rebuild ties with Europe and advance plans for reconstruction.
German police locked down Berlin's government district on Monday as Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara visits the capital under heavy security. The measures follow reported assassination threats, with tight protection around key locations. Al-Shara met Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul and Chancellor Friedrich Merz, with talks focusing on Syria's political transition and the return of migrants. Wadephul said Germany stands with Syria, while Economy Minister Katharina Reiche highlighted potential cooperation in energy, construction and technology. Later in the day, at a joint press conference, Merz called the fall of dictatorship in Syria a historic moment and said many Syrians are now looking to return home. He urged Damascus to build an inclusive state, stressing that stability and economic growth will be key to rebuilding, and said Syria can count on Germany's support.
Mr. President, you are working under extremely difficult conditions to build a better future for your country. On behalf of the entire German government, I explicitly encourage you to create space in the new Syria for all Syrians, regardless of their religion, ethnic background or gender. In this spirit, Mr. President, you can count on Germany's support on the path towards a better future. We discussed this in detail in our bilateral meeting.
Speaking at the same press conference, President Ahmed al-Shara thanked Germany for its support and outlined key steps for rebuilding Syria.
Today we discussed several key issues, most notably reconstruction, Syrian refugees, and regional security and stability. Our discussions were based on important shared understandings, foremost among them that reconstruction begins with providing the basic foundations of life, including energy, education, and healthcare. In this context, we are pleased to crown today's talks with the signing of a strategic memorandum of understanding with Siemens Energy, a company that remained active at the Deir Ali power plant throughout the years of the Syrian revolution. Today, we are restoring this partnership in its official framework as a step towards bringing electricity back to Syria.
The visit highlights growing engagement between Germany and Syria as reconstruction efforts begin to take shape.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he has no objection to countries sending oil to Cuba, signaling a shift in U.S. policy after a month of restricting shipments to the island. His comments come as a Russian crude oil tanker expected to deliver a major shipment is nearing Cuba. Until now, Washington had effectively blocked oil flows to the island in an effort to pressure the government in Havana.
If a country wants to send some oil into Cuba right now, I have no problem with it. Doesn't help him. If he loses one boatload of oil, that's all it is. It's fine. If he wants to do that, and if other countries want to do it, it doesn't bother me much. It's not going to have an impact. Cuba's finished. They have a bad regime. They have very bad and corrupt leadership. And whether or not they get a boat of oil, it's not going to matter. I'd prefer letting it in, whether it's Russia or anybody else, because the people need heat and cooling and all of the other things that you need.
Now to space news. NASA is preparing to send astronauts back towards the moon for the first time in more than 5 decades, marking a major step in its Artemis program. Here is more.
NASA is preparing to launch Artemis 2, its first crewed mission to the moon in more than 50 years. 4 astronauts will travel on a 10-day journey around the moon and back, going farther into space than any human mission before.
The main goal of Artemis 2 is for the first time to fly crew. So we're flying astronauts on this mission, and we're going to take them and we're going to fly around the moon and back. So this will be the first time we've flown crew out to the moon since 1972.
After launch, the Orion spacecraft will spend about 24 hours in Earth orbit, where critical life support systems will be tested before heading deeper into space. Once confirmed, engines will fire, sending the crew on a trajectory towards the moon. They will fly around the far side, using the moon's gravity to swing back towards Earth.
While we're at the moon, we're going to take images and look at the far side of the moon. We're going to take our astronauts farther than any human has ever been from Earth before, so that we'll break the record from Apollo.
On board, astronauts will run experiments on human health, radiation exposure, and how crews live and work in deep space. The mission will end with a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, where recovery teams will bring the crew back to shore. The crew includes 3 NASA astronauts and 1 Canadian, underlining the program's international partnership. Artemis 2 will not land on the moon, but it is a critical step towards future missions that aim to return humans to the lunar surface later this decade.
After the break, we turn to Islamabad, where diplomats from Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Turkey have wrapped up 2 days of talks aimed at easing tensions in the Middle East. Stay with us.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Hello there. 1 month into a war that's redefining and reshaping the Middle East, world at large is holding its breath. A looming 6th of April US deadline is threatening entire energy infrastructure of Iran. The conflict sits on a razor's edge between fragile peace arrangement possibility and further regional conflagration. Amidst talk of indirect back-channel communications and further military invasion of Iran, what is the definitive endgame for Israel? Today I've spoken to the ambassador of this country to Azerbaijan, His Excellency Ronen Klaus, about this particular matter in a probing and exclusive look at the strategy behind the war and the day after. Join me this evening on A News for context.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Regional powers are stepping up diplomatic efforts to contain the Iran conflict, now entering its second month. Building on those efforts, talks in Islamabad are now focusing on practical steps to ease tensions, including securing key shipping routes and outlining a framework for broader negotiations.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan attended high-level talks in Islamabad over the weekend. as part of an intensifying four-way diplomatic effort to end the regional conflict, now in its second month. The meeting was hosted by Pakistan and included Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, along with the foreign ministers of Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Details of the closed-door discussions were not immediately made public. But speaking to reporters shortly afterward, Dar said the four diplomats had discussed possible meanings of achieving what he described as a quick and permanent end to the ongoing war between Iran, Israel, and the United States. According to sources cited by Reuters, the talks in Islamabad also addressed proposals for reopening the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping. The strategic waterway has faced unprecedented restrictions in recent weeks, disrupting global energy markets and raising concerns about maritime security. Turkey remains at the center of diplomatic efforts to contain the crisis, maintaining contacts with both Western and regional actors. Ankara has called for de-escalation, stressing the need to keep shipping lanes open, particularly given the economic implications of continued energy disruptions in the Persian Gulf. In a subsequent statement, Pakistan's foreign minister asserted that China fully supports the four-way diplomatic initiative. Beijing has repeatedly called for restraint and the resumption of dialogue, while expressing concern about the impact of the war on global trade and energy supplies. Officials say the Islamabad talks are part of a broader diplomatic push aimed at preventing the war from expanding further and encouraging dialogue between the belligerents. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Pakistan is stepping into a potential diplomatic breakthrough, offering to host talks between the United States and Iran as tensions threaten global energy routes. With the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of global oil once flowed, largely disrupted, regional powers including Turkey, Egypt and Saudi Arabia are pushing for de-escalation. Joining us now is Hamza Ashar Salam, editor at the Pakistan Daily, speaking to us from Chicago. Mr. Salam, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Salam, how significant is Pakistan's offer to mediate between the United States and Iran, and what gives Pakistan credibility as a potential broker in this conflict?
Well, at the moment, Pakistan is the only global power which is trusted by both the US and Iran. Pakistan enjoys a very close relationship with the Trump administration, which makes its potential as a key mediator more powerful. And also with the Iranian government, Pakistan has had a very strong relationship. Iran is also Pakistan's neighbor, which adds to Pakistan's interest in mediating this conflict. And also it seems that Pakistan also enjoys the support of other powers, including Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and even China. Now, Pakistan's foreign minister is expected to fly to China soon, which makes Pakistan the top mediator at the moment.
Mr. Salam, do you see Washington and Tehran considering Islamabad as a serious venue for talks?
Well, yes, it seems like the safest place right now. Islamabad is a place where both leaderships of the Iranian government and the American government would feel comfortable in coming. It is a relatively neutral venue. And there's also one reason why Islamabad might be best suited is because there have been no Iranian attacks on Pakistan as yet, which shows that Pakistan enjoys a great relationship with the Iranian government as well as with the US. So this is why it could potentially be the optimal place for talks.
Mr. Salam, in your view, how critical is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to global markets right now?
Well, it is extremely critical. We've already seen the price of oil shoot up. In Pakistan, there has been a significant increase also in other countries. But there is some hope because we have seen at least 20 ships bearing Pakistani flags cross the Strait of Hormuz. And even in yesterday's quadrilateral meeting between the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz was one of the top priorities. So I think that if this mediation is successful, one of the first things we will see is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
What role are regional players like Turkey and Saudi Arabia really playing behind the scenes?
Well, behind the scenes, Turkey is calling for de-escalation. It is making a lot of efforts to ensure that tensions are reduced. But on Saudi Arabia, we have conflicting reports because Saudi Arabia has been significantly targeted by Iran. So we have seen stories in the international press which suggest that though Saudi Arabia is calling for de-escalation publicly, behind the scenes, it is supporting the US and even Israeli efforts in Iran. So it still remains to be seen exactly how these actors will interact in the future, but it also depends on whether Iran is willing to minimize its attacks on Gulf nations, including Saudi Arabia.
Mr. Salam, is this coordination among regional powers a sign of a broader diplomatic alignment?
Well, yes, absolutely. It shows how the global community is coming together to ensure peace. And it also shows the role Pakistan enjoys as a trusted force of the global community. So I think this is a very positive step, and these mediation efforts should be supported by the greater global community, and all nations should play their role to ensure that this conflict de-escalates.
So how do you interpret Donald Trump's optimism about a deal being reached soon?
Well, it is definitely possible. And as far as this conflict is concerned, it still seems that President Trump holds the Trump card. So if he is publicly aligning himself to peace efforts, I think this is a very positive step. It's a great omen. And I think that we could potentially in the next few days and weeks, we could see some de-escalation, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and then potentially greater peace in the Middle East and the world at large.
Mr. Salam, but does the U.S. troop buildup contradict the message of diplomacy?
Well, yes, this could be interpreted in such a way, but it also shows that the U.S. is prepared for any and every eventuality. As the superpower of the world, it is taking all precautions and ensuring that it is prepared for any kind of Iranian response. And there are also a lot of voices in the White House and also in Israel which are calling for troop deployment, which could ultimately result in regime change. So I think that is the plan B. But so far, it seems that more voices in the White House, including Vice President J.D. Vance, are pushing for de-escalation and potentially ending this conflict sooner rather than later.
So in your view, could economic pressure, especially disruptions to energy flows, force quicker negotiations?
Well, yes, I think that even so far, Iran has allowed certain countries to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So this is a very positive sign. And I think peace efforts should build on this. Both sides should refrain from attacking each other, especially energy infrastructure, to ensure that global energy flows don't get disrupted, because that completely changes the global trade order, which is not good for any country.
Mr. Salam, so what are the risks if diplomacy fails in the coming days or weeks?
Well, this could potentially morph into a global conflict. It could have a nuclear element as well, and other actors could get involved. Gulf nations are signaling an interest of joining this conflict as combatants. Pakistan also has a strategic mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia, which could lead to Pakistan entering the fray as well. So we could see other proxy actors like Hezbollah, like the Houthis, and other Iranian proxies entering this theater. So the implications could be far and wide, and it could potentially become World War III, as analysts are claiming.
Hamza Ashar Salam, thank you for your insights and for being with us today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. After the break, we'll get the latest from our correspondents in their regions.
Hello there. 1 month into a war that is redefining and reshaping the Middle East, the world at large is holding its breath. A looming 6th of April US deadline is threatening entire energy infrastructure of Iran. The conflict sits on a razor's edge between fragile peace arrangement possibility and further regional conflagration. Amidst talk of indirect back-channel communications and further military invasion of Iran, what is the definitive endgame for Israel? Today I've spoken to the ambassador of this country to Azerbaijan, His Excellency Ronen Kraus, about this particular matter in a probing and exclusive look at the strategy behind the war and the day after. Join me this evening on A News for context.
Welcome back. You're watching Prime Time. Iran is pushing back against a set of proposals from Washington, D.C., describing them as unrealistic and lacking good faith. As tensions remain high more than a month into the conflict, lawmakers in Tehran are also considering major strategic steps. Turaj Shiralillah has more.
Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai has said that the U.S. 15-point proposals, which were communicated to Tehran through third parties, are very radical and illogical. According to official news media, he dismissed the plan, saying, talking about matters that are part of the inherent rights of Iranians is not a sign of good faith or seriousness in any diplomacy. In another development, Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, in a message to mark the 30th day of Israel-US war on Iran, ruled out Washington's proposals as a wish list. He said that US is expressing its desires by announcing what it has not achieved in the war, seeking them through diplomacy. As the war entered its 31st day, 2 urgent draft bills were proposed at Iran's parliament over the weekend to be discussed at the plenary sessions. According to local news media, quoting senior Iranian MPs, the first draft suggests Tehran's withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, referring to its provisions to do so under serious threats. And the second draft bill on shipping security in the Strait of Hormuz suggests excise of environment pollution taxes and charging service fees, while Iran has blocked transit of its adversaries' oil and gas tankers from the strategic waterway. Turaj Shiralillah from downtown Tehran for A News.
Britain is considering deploying a Royal Navy vessel to the Strait of Hormuz as concerns grow over maritime security and the disruption of one of the world's most critical oil routes. Zena Farizada has more.
Britain is preparing to deploy a Royal Navy evacuation vessel to the Strait of Hormuz, equipped with autonomous drones designed to detect and clear sea mines, according to the Sunday Times. RFA Lime Bay, an amphibious landing ship with capacity for up to around 500 troops and onboard medical and defensive systems, is currently undergoing maintenance in Gibraltar and had been scheduled for training exercises in the Mediterranean. However, contingency plans authorized by Defense Secretary John Healey could see the vessel redirected to the Gulf as part of efforts to secure one of the world's most critical shipping crews. The ship is expected to be fitted with advanced mine-clearing technology, including underwater drones and remotely operated systems, allowing it to act as a mothership for seabed scanning and disposal operations. A defense source said no final decision has been taken, describing the move as a preventative step to give ministers options if action is required to restore the flow of commercial shipping. Royal Navy mine hunting drones already in the region are also being considered for deployment as part of discussions around a wider multinational effort to reopen the strait. The development comes amid a growing international pressure to act. Meanwhile, the United States has increased its military presence in the region with an amphibious assault ship carrying thousands of personnel arriving in recent days. The escalation follows weeks of conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran, with continued missile and drone attacks reported across the region. The Strait of Hormuz has been severely disrupted since early March, contributing to a sharp rise in global oil prices and leaving vessels stranded. Around 20 million barrels of oil normally pass through the route each day, making it one of the most strategically important energy corridors in the world. Any deployment of British assets is likely to depend on how the security situation develops. Zena Ferzadeh, A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Georgia's economic ties with the United Kingdom are expanding despite growing political tensions between Tbilisi and Western partners. A new high-level meeting highlights cooperation in investment and transport, even as London calls for stricter sanctions against Georgian officials. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more from Tbilisi.
Georgia's Minister of Economy, Mariam Kruishvili, met with UK Ambassador Gareth Edward Ward in Tbilisi on 27 March to discuss deepening economic cooperation between Georgia and the United Kingdom. According to the Ministry of Economy, the UK has been Georgia's largest source of foreign direct investment over the past 2 years, reflecting strong confidence from British businesses. The talks focused on expanding trade, developing infrastructure, and strengthening Georgia's role as a regional transit hub linking international markets. Both sides also highlighted growing air connectivity with increased passenger traffic driven by airlines such as British Airways and EasyJet. In addition, Georgian officials emphasized compliance with international sanctions in maritime transport, stating that port operations fully meet global standards. However, the meeting comes amid strained relations between Georgia and its Western partners. Tensions have escalated since the controversial 2024 elections and the ruling Georgian Duma government's decision to suspend EU accession talks and introduce legislation seen as targeting independent media and civil society. The UK has taken a firm stance, already sanctioning pro-government broadcasters and calling for further measures. A recent report by the UK House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee urged expanded financial and travel sanctions against Georgian officials and entities accused of spreading disinformation and undermining democracy. Despite these political disagreements, economic cooperation remains active, underlining a complex relationship where strategic partnerships continue alongside increasing diplomatic pressure. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Afghanistan and Iran are strengthening ties as regional tensions continue to rise. In Kabul, senior officials from both sides have held talks focused on trade, diplomacy and wider developments in the region. Our Tamim Bahis has more.
In Kabul, Afghanistan's Foreign Ministry says Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi held talks with Ali Raza Bigdili, the acting head of Iran's embassy, focusing on bilateral relations and wider regional developments. According to the ministry, Muttaqi said trade between Afghanistan and Iran is continuing to grow, describing economic ties as increasingly positive. He also praised what he called Iran's constructive position on the recent tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan, saying Kabul wants outstanding issues between the two sides to be addressed through meaningful and sincere dialogue. The Iranian diplomat also gave a positive assessment of cooperation between Kabul and Tehran, especially in the area of trade, and said Iran's leadership is closely watching the latest situation between Afghanistan and Pakistan while supporting a peaceful solution. The meeting also turned to the wider regional conflict. Bigdili shared Tehran's position on the latest developments following what he described as war initiated by the United States and Israel. Muttaqi in turn called the situation aggression against Iran and warned that any further expansion of the conflict would be damaging for the entire region. Overall, the meeting underlined growing Afghanistan-Iran engagement, with both sides stressing trade cooperation and diplomacy as regional tensions continue. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Japan is prioritizing oil supplies from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan as risks grow around Middle East bring shipping routes. Our Fariza Kalimurzuna has more from Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Japan is set to prioritize oil supplies from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan for its domestic market as concerns grow over disruptions to global flows through the Strait of Hormuz. According to the Japanese newspaper Yomiuri Shimbun, this shift is tied directly to energy security. More than 90% of Japan's crude still comes from the Middle East, so any disruption there has an immediate impact. That's why attention is turning to the Caspian region. INPEX, Japan's largest oil and gas exploration and production company, is involved in major projects here, including Kashagan in Kazakhstan, producing around 430,000 barrels a day, and Azeri-Chirag Gunashli in Azerbaijan with output of about 350,000. The crude is close in quality to Middle Eastern grades, so it can be used without major changes. Until now, most of this oil was going to Europe, and now if Japanese refiners and trading houses step in, part of those spot cargoes will be redirected to Japan as a priority. But the trade-off is distance. Tankers will have to go through the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, or all the way around Africa. That means up to 55 days from Kazakhstan and up to 50 from Azerbaijan. More than double the usual route and more expensive. At the same time, Japan is also looking beyond the region, including Central Asia, South America, and the United States. For now, US oil still makes up a small share, around 3.8% of total imports. Fariza Kalimurza, Almaty, A News.
Central Asia is facing mounting pressure from climate change, with glaciers melting at an accelerating pace and raising concerns over long-term water security. A new UN-backed assessment highlights the scale of the risk as countries across the region move to boost cooperation and adapt to the growing environmental threat. Sevilla Rajapova has more from Uzbekistan.
Central Asia is stepping up efforts to address rapid glacier melt, as highlighted by United Nations report warning of unprecedented climate pressure on mountain ecosystems. Glaciers currently store around 70% of world's fresh water, supporting nearly 2 billion people, but rising temperatures are shortening winters and accelerating ice loss across the region. According to estimates by the United Nations Environment Programme, declining glacier-fed water resources could result in global economic losses of up to $4 trillion due to disruptions in agriculture, energy production, and urban water supply. The situation is particularly acute in Central Asia, where temperatures are rising almost twice as fast as the global average, increasing risks of desertification and water shortages. Regional data underscores the scale of the challenge. In Tajikistan, more than 1,000 out of 14,000 glaciers have already disappeared, while total glacier volume has declined by nearly 1/3 in recent decades. In Kyrgyzstan, glacier average has shrunk by 16% over the past 50 to 70 years. In response, Central Asian countries are strengthening cooperation on glacier monitoring and climate adaptation. A regional strategy involving Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan focuses on joint data collection and coordinated policy measures as global attention to the issue grows, following the designation of 2025 as the International Year of Glacier Preservation. It is Sevilla Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
On behalf of the A News team, thank you for watching Prime Time and join us every weekday for the latest developments from around the world.